Yeah, so the next book or scroll that we'll be talking about is the Fire Scroll. And this was definitely my favorite scroll of the book. And as if Richard said that the Water Scroll is kind of about the science of martial arts, I would say the Fire Scroll is more of the like philosophy of how you should fight and what you should be thinking about when you're fighting. And I guess I just sort of like to start off with a quote, as I often do. So, in my strategy, the training for killing enemies is by way of many contests, fighting for survival, discovering the meaning of life and death, learning the way of the sword, judging the strength of attacks, and understanding the way of the edge and ridge of the sword. So, yeah, it sort of goes back to what both of you were saying, Jack, that, he talks a lot about in this section of how you have to be uniformly focused on the task at hand. And his task at hand happens to just be killing someone. Uh, Obviously, I think that's true for whatever you're doing in life. And I have a problem with this in my own wake of life. Is a lot of times I try and focus on too many things, and then things tend not to be that great. When I focus though, things go a lot better. So throughout this scroll, he goes through a lot of sort of examples where, to me, what he boils down is that you should pick one specific thing, focus on it, and then somehow give yourself an advantage over your opponent. He does this through a lot of different philosophies, all that sort of end with you must research and train diligently in this, which is kind of annoying, but also kind of accurate because you can't just do these things right off the bat. So some of my favorite like parts that he was making were he had one quote where he said, "When you're in battle, you should always try and suppress the enemy's useful actions, but allow his useless actions." So like, I think what he's saying is allow your enemy to run around and like use up his energy, but never allow him to strike. And that you just sort of tire him out. And he uses a lot of wasted energy while he uses no productive energy. And the entire scroll goes through a lot of that. Let me see if I can.
Was that where he was talking about like holding down the pillow?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that is exactly right. Holding down the pillow. Very good.
That concept of like figuring out what they're going to do before they do
Do
it.
right, and then you allow them to do the useless action, but you stop them from doing the useful action, which is, I would say, this is sort of why I think this book goes into business, because he then goes into a lot of detail of how you attack the enemy, and you attack the enemy by always finding the weak spots, like where you have an advantage, and I think that's accurate in not only just, I guess, fighting, but I mean, you brought up pickleball, and we have our pickleball ad. Whenever I'm playing, I'm always looking for my opponent's worst shot, and I just try and pick on it. It's
Yeah.
usually the backhand. So every game, I just start off by trying to hit shots to the backhand. And if they can't hit a backhand, you just keep doing it. And that's a great way to get free points. Just like if you can't, if you as an enemy can't parry in some way, you're probably going to be attacked that way. And that's probably why you'll die. So let me
The
see.
backhand. Backhand's my weak spot.
Backhand is most people's weak spots. I mean, he talked a lot about, sort of where to attack and how to attack, and it mostly just boiled down to finding your opponent's weaknesses. The one that I also really liked was in the section titled "The Mountain Sea Change," where he's saying if let me see if I can actually just find the quotes. If the enemy thinks of the mountains, attack like the sea, and if he thinks of the sea, attack like the mountains. Sort of a deep philosophical idea of just be unpredictable and attack in interesting and new ways.
I mean, that kind of goes back to the part in the Earth Scroll where it talks about rhythm, like in
Yeah,
figuring out, what the opponent's expecting and kind of do something
something
different.
different, right? I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of this was, a lot of this chapter was, try and do things surprising to just throw your enemy into confusion and make them disorganized. And then he always breaks it down into large scale battles for single duels and how nothing should really change in that, you fight. If you fight as an army, you should fight in the same way that if you fight as a single duel. And he had one other quote that I loved, in that he said, I don't exactly remember what section it came out of, but it was, if you know that you're a good warrior and you have practiced diligently, you should not even really care about how skilled your opponent is, because you know you're prepared. And I thought that's like so true. A lot of times in sports, I mean, I personally get so worried about if I'm playing someone I've never played, like how good they are and, you know, what maybe they can do, instead of just focusing on what I know I can do and just going out and playing. And a lot of times I find that when I worry about the unknown of like maybe how good this other person is, I end up playing a lot worse.
It actually kind of like drives me nuts. Like when certain side, like recently, like Manchester City, like they play one
They
way,
just
the
play
whole
totally different for
they
no
play,
reason.
yeah, they play so great the entire year playing one formation. And then they were playing Lyon from France, and they got worried, I guess, about their forwards like getting behind, and they went to like a 5 in the back instead of 4 in the back. And
It was a bizarre it was a bizarre strategy. I guess the last thing I sort of have to say about this is obviously some of these sections cannot be taken literally, because he has one section titled "The Body of a Rock," and he mentions, when you have mastered the way of strategy, you can suddenly make your body like a rock, and 10,000 things cannot touch you. This is the body of a rock. I don't think that's obviously not literal. I think it just means that when you're really practiced, it is very difficult to injure you. So I guess that's about all I have on the fire scroll. I guess, do you guys have any?
I was just like, he got like so specific in some spots, like keeping the light to your back. Like he does go like very specific on like how to like move the opponent around.
Yeah.
That is, I guess
that went into knowing your environment and like fighting on your own terms.
Yeah.
And this is relating back to the water school as well, where once you understand the science of fighting, and once you perfect your forms and understand what approaches you can use for engaging your opponent, then everything ties back together and you're able to adjust to the situation. So you, like water, you adjust to the situation where instead of fighting fire with fire, you can just fight fire with water and take your opponent out before your opponent takes you out. Same thing with dealing with situations in the business world. When you're competing against other people with negotiation, either for that raise or that promotion or for that deal, you know what you're good at, and you have it down to science as to how you can negotiate. With that in mind, your opponents are most likely going to stick with their process and their methods, and they develop that into a system. But your system is to be ever changing and adapt to the situation that you find yourself in. So you're perfecting yourself, and you're using your ability to adjust to the situation to be able to win. And having that mindset will give you the leg up over the competition, where they're very rigid, but you're very fluid.
Very nice. What did you guys think of like how like at the end of a lot of paragraphs they would just say like, this needs to be carefully considered, or this needs careful examination? You did that a lot.
Training and studying.
I think how I read those passages is that Miyamoto Musashi pays attention to the details, and he really cares about getting those little things right. Because if you get the little things right, they add up to a big thing, and that can be the difference between life and death. And I believe that he wrote that article because of his experiences in the battlefield, where he saw warriors that were much more talented and skilled lose to those that weren't perceived to be as skilled, because those who weren't as skilled got the little things right. Mm-hmm. And they paid attention to the fundamentals.
Yeah, because he does talk about like a warrior that does it, or like someone that reads this trying to get like a broad view of this book will not take away what he wants. Like he does say like you really need the details.
You need to go like, practice and research. diligently.
Yeah, and I mean, there was one pass. I don't remember which scroll it was, but he said like every word needs to be examined, like every little detail. And it almost made me think like, well, if this was originally written in Japanese, I wonder if something
How
maybe
much
got
has been
lost in
lost in
the
translation?
translation.
Right.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I thought. But okay. Cool. So are we going to the win scroll now?
That is
But yeah,
correct.
I guess.
Okay. So what were people's thoughts on the win scroll?
So my thoughts on reading the Wind Scroll was that Miyamoto Musashi was using his approach as a benchmark against other approaches that were taught by other schools. And for him, he really looked down the other approaches. And the reason why is that they emphasized more for show.
Mm-hmm.
His school of thought was to emphasize in building the perfect warrior. And he wanted to teach techniques that were applicable and that can be used in real world situations rather than just being used for fancy competitions and to make the daimyos and even the emperor proud.
Yeah, because
He's more of a
more yeah, because he does talk about how some of these schools are kind of like for show, and they kind of say like, oh well, we'll teach you like 50 types of sword strokes or whatever, and Musashi's kind of saying like, well, really, there's only a few ways to like cut somebody down or like really swing a sword. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess this is also kind of to the real world, like a competitive analysis type of thing where you're like going and looking to see what the competition does and to see if it's really true or if you believe in what the competition is doing, or if if you like it, can you copy it and just alter a little thing? Or that's kind of what I took from it.
I mean, I sort of agreed with, I guess both of you, Richard a lot, in that he was really just saying that these other schools are not up to snuff with his. On the same note, you sort of have to take it with a grain of salt because he's writing the book, but he's also writing the book when he's about to die.
Right.
And he was obviously a very accomplished samurai, so he really probably should be believed that these other schools were not as good.
Yeah, I think they said he got his like first kill when he was like 13 years old or something.
Yeah.
And then like he stopped when he was like 30 or something.
Yeah, kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
The ones that I thought were really interesting when he was talking about the foot speed and like the movement,
Mm-hmm.
and he's pretty much just said, I think he always just, regardless of what he's doing, I think the general gist was he always moves at the same speed, like a brisk or a slow walk.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that even in his fighting. And these other schools are talking about jumping or running or floating. And he just mentions how it's not good and you never know what type of terrain you're going to be fighting on. And, if you're in a swamp, you can't really run or you can't really jump. And if your entire practice is predicated on jumping, then you're kind of SOL if you're fighting in like some type of swamp or like boggy terrain. And I think the general gist was that his school was the all-purpose school, kind of good in any type of situation, ready to go.
And he also kind of touched upon when you become so good at something, like the experts, it doesn't really look like they're trying that hard. Like it doesn't really look like they're rushed or they're moving fast. And I think a lot of times, like you can see it in sports really easily, like the ones that are really good, like they make it look so easy. Like it never looks like they're panicked and they're kind of just like methodical about how they go about their business. So yeah. And like, I mean, even in the office, like some people that are like super good at things, like it seems like they're never panicky. Like they always think there's a solution or that they'll eventually find the solution. So
I mean, Federer, I think, is probably in sports. I guess going back to sports, I would say Federer is the best example of that. Roger Federer, the tennis player, even when he's losing, you always sort of Well, maybe not so much anymore because he's like almost 40, but 10 years ago, even when he was losing, you always thought he was going to win just because he never looked like he was trying, and still was crushing everyone.
Yeah, and you always got the sense like he would figure the other person out.
Right.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah, so let's see. I guess that's about all.
That's about it, yeah.
Okay. The last scroll is kind of weird. It's the scroll of emptiness. I didn't, I don't really know exactly what he was trying to get at by this scroll. Did you guys have any thoughts?
I was somewhat perplexed by this. Yeah.
It was just like a page, I think. It was like a page or two, whereas the others were about like 20 pages. So there wasn't a lot of material to begin with.
I mean, reading the scroll, it seems that he's putting himself in a state of nirvana where, in the end, once you've obtained perfection, evil doesn't exist anymore. Only reason, logic, certainty, good. Everything seems to be balanced out. And he mentioned that there's really no emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think he's trying to get to it is that if you think something is empty because you see it or because you've achieved perfection, that's not really the case. I mean, once you go through his school and you perfect it, you become a paragon of what a warrior should be. And that itself would seem empty, but at the same time, it's not. You are trained for what you're supposed to do.
Dang, that's deep, Richard. Very nice. Very well said. So, well, I guess we'll start with Richard. Well, Richard, what did you think like when you finished this book? Like, because you actually, you're the one who recommended this book to me first. And, so you really like this book. So
I do actually. And the reason why I like this book is because Miyamoto Musashi understands what it means to walk the path. And he wants to make sure those that are going to walk in his shoes when he passes on are trained in the manner of the samurai. He cared so much about being the perfect samurai, being a paragon of a virtuous warrior, that he felt the need to document it and to open a school and to train people under his tutelage to make sure that they became the warrior that the daimyos and even the emperor needed to protect the honor and the stability of Japan. And he knew what he was doing was important. But at the same time, though, people in the future understood what he was trying to get to, and they realized that many of his writings can be used to train people in various types of professions. He even mentioned the same concepts in the Earth School. In the Earth School, we're talking about how a carpenter is supposed to be trained or how a merchant is supposed to be trained. You can take those principles and concepts that are used to train warriors, and you can use them to train people in almost any profession. What's needed is the will. And also, when you do the training, you want to avoid any of the pitfalls.
Good.
Yeah, I guess the first time I read this was, I think, probably 2 or 3 years ago. And, sort of one of those things, I had read that this was considered one of the best business books out there. And after I was done, I was just utterly confused as to why. Going back, rereading it, I enjoyed it a lot more, and I think I got a lot more out of it. I think maybe I just wasn't applying it to my own life as much, and maybe I wasn't researching things diligently enough the first time I read it, but I enjoyed it a lot more this time, and I think I got a lot more out of it about just maybe how to apply some of these sort of ancient, or not even really that ancient, practices into modern day life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of with Al. The first time I read it, I thought it was kind of, now that when this was printed, there's that other book that it's printed with that I think I read that too. I forgot it's called. What is that called? The Book of Family Traditions. Now I think that was the part I didn't like so much, but the Book of Five Rings, this second read through, I enjoyed much more. And I think the big takeaway for me, and I think he even said it in like the intro, was that one must be able to like stay calm in times of like chaos, like to have a clear mind, to try to and when we touched on this before, like, but to try to see things from afar that are really close up, and vice versa. And the quote I had mentioned from the Earth Scroll, never become too fond of any one weapon. I think that's kind of what I'll take away from this book. So any final says on the book?
Yeah, I guess I didn't say this, but my main takeaway, both the first and the second time that I read it, was always be moving to stay in your opponent's blind spot. That's really what I took away with it. Took away from it.
I mean, for me, it's one of the most well-balanced books when it comes to being able to train people to not only be a warrior, but to take the concepts and principles to apply it to any type of profession. This book is definitely a very useful guide for anyone that wants to train themselves to be the perfect what they want to be. It takes time and it takes patience and discipline, but if they put their heart into it and they see it as a challenge, then if they follow the guidelines prescribed in this book and they turn it into a process, and they will see, then their odds of success will increase.
The long sword is always heavy at first.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have did we decide on the book for next week?
Yeah, we didn't. So there's unfortunately no teaser. I could say something deep and philosophical and just have people guess, but I would also be guessing. So
okay, so we got a surprise for next week then.
That surprised all of us.
Surprise to all of us. Okay, that could be fun.
As always, we're Brothers on Books. Feel free to reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com if you have any book recommendations or would like to be on the show and host a podcast with us. And I think with that said, here's our featured song to take us out. It's Sabe, In Your Arms.
Okay, take it easy.